listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, Ange, and welcome you to episode number 35. Today, we welcome Grammy-nominated lead guitarist and founder of the band Great White, Mr. Mark Kendall. Mark was born into a musically gifted family. He grew up in Huntington Beach, California. His father played jazz trumpet. His mother sang her heart out to jazz tunes before adoring audiences. His grandfather, too, was a virtuoso on the piano. Citing Jimi Hendrix, Cream, and The Doors as early influences, Kendall's passion and natural abilities got him hooked on guitar. Since 1982, the Great White sound has captivated audiences worldwide with crushing blues-based guitar riffs and swagger that invokes an emotional high for anyone that listens. Best known for their Grammy-nominated Best Hard Rock Performance hit, the gold-setting Once Bitten, Twice Shy, which has over 900,000 copies on this single alone, Great White has sold over 10 million albums worldwide, has 6 top 100 Billboard hits, 9 top 200 Billboard albums, 2 multi-platinum albums, 5 gold records, and clocked the top of MTV videos 4 times. For Mark, while music business has changed dramatically since he first picked up a guitar, he still believes in human connections and imperfections, which is why he's a perfect fit for our Coffee and Conversation podcast. Mark is a solid supporter of Music Cares, where his relentless efforts to help those seeking a sober life have been expressed in feature stories on Fox News and numerous national radio programs. He is a baseball enthusiast, he loves the Dodgers, and boasts professional skills in billiards and poker, all of which he's showcased on the popular Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Whew, this is an amazing episode. So, fill up your coffee, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Alrighty. So listeners, we are recording this on Friday, November 10th. It's not going to be released on Friday, November 10th, but today it is. I'm in Los Altos, California. It is a beautiful sunny day here in Los Altos, California. And yet I am super stoked to interview Mark Kendall. And I am going to allow him to introduce himself, and then we'll get started. So Mark, please tell us why you're here today.
Well, my name's Mark Kendall. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a guitar player, and I'm a sober advocate. I've been reaching out to people for about, 12 years now. So I've worked with probably about 150 people one-on-one, and also tried to inspire people out there that are suffering or, maybe or thinking about getting sober, but really don't know the road to travel. So all I've done is offer my sober friendship, encouragement, support. I always tell people that I'm always available to be a sober friend. And when I get together with them one-on-one, I basically just tell them how I did it. I'm not out there promoting any rehab centers or 12-step groups or anything like that. But because I keep true to principles and whatnot, but when I get together with them one-on-one, I tell them exactly how I got sober, how I've been able to stay that way. And, maybe they can take a couple things from that, apply it, because obviously what they're doing isn't working so good. So, so that's basically it. get a lot of gratification to see sick people get well. That's really about it.
Well, we have a lot in common then. So that is amazing. So how about, why don't we start and maybe just tell a little bit about why you became so passionate about this work? And I will say, I know one of the challenges that I have is that it is a struggle to work with individuals who want a better life, and yet it is super hard. So I'll be vulnerable here. I shared that I went into rehab as a consequence of my kidnapping, and yet still today I still struggle to not drink alcohol, and it's a constant struggle. And I'm a very successful professional, very educated. I've done 6 Ironmans. I'm very resilient, and so I can conquer a lot of things. And yet when the stress gets high, then alcohol seems easy. It seems like the solution. However, it's not. And so I know it can be a struggle working with those individuals. So can you maybe perhaps talk a little bit about that journey that you have?
Well, the main thing, is realize that the time is going to take care of itself, for one thing. So you're not like, don't come in saying I'm going to stay sober forever or whatever, throwing up these impossible tasks in front of yourself, impossible goals. So I think just staying sober one day at a time is like, that's something I hold on to for dear life. And the other thing, when I work with people, I try to identify their triggers. What is it? When you get really mad, do you just say, oh, F it, I'm going to go drink? Or, is it when you're depressed? If you identify all those triggers, when one comes in and says, oh, you want us to drink, that voice starts happening, you can just kind of shoot it down and realize that's one of my weak areas, but I'm going to fight through this. And the other thing is, when you get a physical urge to want to drink, that urge lasts 2 minutes only. It's a 2-minute, 2 minutes roll by and it's going to go away. So if you can get through those 2 minutes and then just kind of take your lumps with what you're going through, it always passes by. And the next day, or maybe even a few hours later, you're so happy that you didn't blow your time over this adverse moment that it's just really rewarding. The whole thing, I always keep everything stupid simple. I mean, dumb guy simple. I'm talking, I won't use that word, but when I roll out of bed every day, I just pray to, that I can be sober one more day. I've literally done that for 15 years. I never take my time for granted. I celebrate like a Mo. I might celebrate, like for a week when I get some milestone, but I don't hover on it in a way like, makes that big of a deal. And most of the reason I overly celebrate is so other people can see it, as opposed, it's like if I'm a bowler and I won the tournament, I'm not going to just hover on my trophy for like a year. just, just think about how great I am. You know what I mean? It's like, so.
My precious.
Yeah, my precious trophy. So I kind of, I like to do everything I'm out to inspire people. I'm never anonymous. I don't want to be anonymous. I want to make a huge deal about what an alcoholic I am, and how I kind of found a way to sustain sobriety, and it's not easy. But I know that there were times where I was like, I wanted to get sober, but I just didn't. It's like all I needed was maybe an encouraging word or some dude to say, hey, you should try this, bro, because you're going through all that pain and stuff. it's kind of, I really feel bad for you. You should try this. And that's really about all I needed, So I know there's people out there that kind of, they're sick of the pain, and but they don't make the first step into like trying the sobriety thing. And everybody told me that my life would get better. And I remember I had the sponsor and everything, because you got to realize I've been trying to get sober for 17 years, and having a lot of white knuckle time. Like, I'll go 2 years without drinking, but didn't do anything about changing myself or my alcoholic behavior. So I did that, and I kept going back and trying it because I was jealous that people could drink normal. There's got to be a way I can do this, and just be the normal dude that watches the game and has a beer. What's the deal? This is just ridiculous. And so I kept trying it, kept failing, and failing. So finally I did give in and, listen to people. But that's really my story in a nutshell. At 34 years old, I was getting a lot of pain. I'd wake up feeling awful, and I'd go, oh, all I have to do is drink 4 beers and everything's going to be fine, But I ended up doing what I call chasing normal, which is it's not like I want to be wasted out of my mind at 10 a.m. It's just I don't want to feel crappy either. And I found that the alcohol, kind of worked, but then it wears off, and you keep running after normal. It's like you're running a marathon to try to, do all this work just to feel okay and not have pain. And I got so sick of it, and then I'd start again. But I didn't get any help. I didn't do any self work. I didn't work on my character defects. I didn't, try to change in any way. I was still lying to everybody about, the way an alcoholic does. I used to tell my wife I had a hamburger when it was pizza. I mean, it was that bad. Like, I just thought I was supposed to lie. It just goes with the territory. So I'm a changed man. I've seen a lot of people get well. It's been a heck of a ride. I love to get involved. I'll fly to somebody celebrating their 1 year. I mean, literally, I've done it, or I'll go speak at a meeting for somebody. I've had a friend just celebrate 5 years. It's a darn miracle. I've been working with that guy forever and ever and ever, and he just kept going out, coming back, going out, coming back, going out. I never gave up, and he has 5 years. So, I get to look
That
at
is
that a
amazing.
lot. Yeah, getting to look at people get well is especially, and even physically, like their appearance completely changes. All of a sudden they just these beautiful people doing great. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, your world does change. I remember going to my sponsor. I had a sponsor, the guy you call when you're getting a bad thought.
Or you're supposed to call before you drink, when that
exactly.
telephone is so freaking heavy.
Exactly. And everybody was telling me that my life was getting better, and I'm like 3.5 months in, right? And I go, bro, I totally believe, what you guys tell me about, my life's going to get better and this and that, but it ain't happened yet, but it did happen. And you're not going to believe it. I mean, things changed for me. Things started to go my way. My finances, everything got great. It's just crazy. And so I wanted to hold on to that, and I kept doing what everybody said. Am I doing this right? And just listen, took direction, and after I had about 3 years, I started working with people and kind of, because I'd been through the learning process, and kind of I go, man, maybe if I'll just want to see what happens if I reach out on Facebook and just offer my sober friendship. Maybe somebody out there's like struggling, or, they might get a hold of me, and maybe something will change for them. So it just started like that. And the first guy, I'll just end this, but the first guy I worked with, I got him into a rehab. He was dead broke. So through a place called Music Cares, kind of what you're doing to raise money for grants and to get people in rehab. So, anyways, they got him into a place called Cumberland, where his wife actually worked as a counselor, and he went in a 5-year period. He went from patient to counselor himself.
I love when I hear those stories.
Yeah, like, so when I got to look at that, I'm just going, holy cow, where's number 2? You know, where's the third guy? And I just kept going, and now I'm like well into the 150s. I send out meditation and prayers every day. You know, we're kind of this online group and stuff. You know, we celebrate when people, you know, hit a milestone.
I'm inviting myself to your online group just so that you know.
Okay. Yeah, I can send
Action item 1.
Okay. So, anyways, that's my story in a nutshell.
So you mentioned you mentioned working on yourself, and I love that. So a lot of the episodes we've talked about, I have this passion about the reality that no one wakes up one day and says, hey, I want to be an addict. It just doesn't happen. There is something underneath it. So we did episode 13 of this podcast. I talked to the head of Ripple Ranch, and we talked about the link between childhood trauma and addiction. In several episodes, we talk about a lot of the underlying challenges, and that, man, I would love for more and more treatment centers to be more trauma informed and come in and say, okay, wait, let's not. Because, for example, for me, I am an overachiever. So I have lots of trauma, and I'll just pick whatever addiction could be available at the moment, right? To not have to deal with that trauma. And so when you were talking about white knuckling it and all of that, I hear that story a lot. Individuals who want to no longer have whatever their addiction is, and I'm just going to say whatever, could be alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex, it could be anything. And white knuckling it, when I see individuals do that, I see miserable individuals that aren't living their best life. But when I see you, I just see the glow in your face and how happy you are. And so tell me about, what steps did you take to work on yourself? If you're talking to me as if, okay, Ange, you need to work on yourself. What are some of the key things that you give as advice that way?
The biggest thing for me, and it's been there my whole life, I have this, like, it's almost like an embedded fear, and I can't even explain it, but like when I get in say a small social group, I'm real nervous, you know. So I needed to figure out a way, and you know, and I was afraid of everything, afraid of my own shadow, you know, afraid of, you know, whatever. So the way I started working on it and kind of outrun my fear, so to speak, was confronting people, say when they're talking about somebody behind their back, then with something bothering me, you know, not in a super aggressive way, like I'm going to fight this guy, just to start feeling more comfortable in my own skin, so to speak. You know, if somebody might be talking about me while I'm in the room, you know, so I might say, hey man, when you say stuff like that, you know, it's upsetting. I mean, you know, I don't know where you're getting off. And wouldn't it be better if you talked about that guy while he was here? Maybe you guys could get things sorted out, you know? And what I found when I practiced this day after day, I mean, literally for months, all the things that I used to be afraid of, going, God, what a wimp I was. I can't believe it. Because the fear was the biggest trigger for me to drink. If I was in a tough situation, 4 beers, go to the situation. Everything's easy now.
I can totally relate. You know what I think is so funny? I love that you're telling the story, because I see people like you and I. So listeners, you're already going to have heard the intro to know who Mark is. And so you're on stage and you're performing. And in my role, I'm not a famous person, but And my role, I lead companies, and people see, I know this is what from Ange, from my experience, people see me and they are like, oh, you're such an extrovert. You command the room. You do all these things. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I am very much an introvert. I very much have to force myself to, I have to do this. Like, okay, you're going to have to flip the switch and go into executive and do these things. And I'm glad that I'm grateful that I'm able to do that. However, I can totally relate to the instance of, okay, I need to drink a couple of glasses of wine so that I can be social and all of that, because social anxiety is huge. And people assume when they see individuals like us that we don't have those fears and those struggles. So I'm so grateful for you sharing that.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Fear, almost everybody I've worked with has some level of fear. And, so that is a giant trigger. Say, for people that are getting sober and they're in the early stages, they got, they're going on 60 days and whatnot. And, they'll get hit with a tough moment, like a fearful moment. And it's a huge trigger. They just want to, grab that drink out of the sky and start going, because so that's why I say to identify these things early, and the effort moment too is going to happen a lot. As soon as you're frustrated, you're going to say, screw this. I'm just going to drink. This ain't working. It's not for me or whatever, you know what I mean? But if you've identified that in advance, you already know that little devil man's coming around. You go, yeah, right. Like, I'm really going to drink over getting pissed off. Are you kidding me? No way. I'm not going to blow my 43 days over because I'm a little angry now. You know what I mean? So, so that's why I think identifying, because when you fight through the trenches of early recovery, it starts to get a little easier. You don't get the urge as much. The space in between urges is like huge. And so that's it. It's basically, a shield, something to keep your guard up. Just have your tools in place. Be ready for that, that thing. There's certain things, and those are the two biggest for me were the fear and getting angry, getting frustrated. I had to watch all that stuff, and I did it by hanging out with people too that were compulsive like me. Because I've been compulsive my whole life. Everything I do, I have to do like insane, like,
Ditto.
If I do something, I've got to be the best in the world at it. I'm going to do it for 12 hours a day and just go. I'm like a crazy man, and that's the way I treated alcohol. I didn't roll out of bed, into a bottle of whiskey, but I drank beer like a damn crazy man. And I got probably real close to the same amount of pain as somebody that does roll out of bed into a whiskey bottle, because I always had a beer in my hand. I drank like a mo. I mean, just every day. And I got all the pain that, a guy that drinks vodka, maybe it didn't eat my insides alive as bad, but I got all the pain and the guilt and the shame. It shows up so large when I would wake up. I'd be so like afraid, like shaky and guilty and shameful, and I looked awful. And it's such a dark place. It's the darkest life. It's the darkest world you could ever live in, and you're trying to escape it all the time. So that's why I say chasing normal, because I want to outrun this darkness and at least try to feel okay. So it's just a vicious circle of just trying to get well all the time, to where all you have to do is not do what you're doing, and you wake up feeling similar every day. You got all these tools. You're working with other people with your problem, and it's a lot of fun to watch people get well. That's what I realized. I was really a selfish alcoholic. This is my body, it's my life. You don't know, this is, what are you worried about? This ain't you. I had that attitude, like, people say, you should really get help, bro. You're a hot mess. And, and, so,
Because the
I don't know.
reality is we're not fooling anyone we think we're fooling.
Yeah. Yeah. The funny thing is people didn't tell me what a mess I was until after I got sober. I'm going, you should have thrown some of these bullets at me when I was, hurt. And, so once I got sober, they're going, yeah, because I thought I'd have friends that would say, hey, what's with the lightweight vibe? What? You can't have a couple of beers? What's the deal? Because normies, that's the way they think. They have no
Yes.
idea that we're, full blown addicts. We're a nightmare. They don't, why don't you just stop? I mean, that's the kind of things they'll say. But I was kind of worried. But what happened was the people that I only had drinking in common with, I didn't have to force anything. They just disappeared on their own. And the people that cared about me, they'd say, dude, I'm so happy for you, so happy you quit drinking. It's you were really, I was worried about you, seriously. That's the kind of feedback I got. But
That's amazing. Well,
yeah.
I'm thinking too, just tying to what you're saying, because, a struggle that I have, and I'm confident you can relate in the industry that you're in, is that alcohol is so prevalent, right? So where I'm at in California, all of our business meetings, we have team building happy hours every other week. It is,
Yeah.
and it is, and I also find for myself what's interesting is I have several employees on my team who don't drink, and when other people are offering them drinks, I'm so fast to speak up and say, this individual doesn't drink. Like, they never drank. Why? And it's like, whoa, wait, why am I it's so easy to speak up and advocate for somebody else than it
Yeah.
is for myself, right? In that instance, like the
I
slippery slope
realized
for myself.
I realized that right away. I used to think at parties like everyone's drinking, everybody has a semi buzz, until I got sober. I had to go to this guitar, kind of thing. I endorsed this company, and they had a company party. I'm at the party, and I'm going, check it out. That guy's not drinking. That chick over there's not drinking. They all had glasses, but they weren't drinking alcohol. And I used to think everybody was. And I ran into a dude that had 13 years sobriety, and I just hung with him all night. Just talking shop, if you will. It was a real early part of my recovery, but I used to think everybody at a party was drinking. I had no idea. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's a trip. But I don't really equate what I do for a living. You know, it, the reason for I could work in a cubicle somewhere and I'd still be marked into the alcoholic, trouble case, or whatever. So, but as far as the availability and it being around and stuff like that, yeah, sure. I mean, but it's everywhere. I, today, these days, I mean, I don't really even think it bothered me early. I was so focused on trying to stay sober today. It didn't really bother me if somebody was drinking or whatever, but I wasn't around it a lot. I wasn't hanging out at bars or anything, either. Uh, but yeah, it's around, and I, I, I have friends who drink. I mean, like normal drinker guys, and yeah, it just doesn't bother me anymore. If somebody
You know what
starts
I found?
spitting on me or something, they're so wasted. I mean, of course, I'm like, hey, man, it's raining in here. What's going on?
One thing that I've also found out is I've read quite a few books recently, and also I've several authors of recovery books that have been on the podcast that have episodes coming up soon. One of which is Craving Recovery, and I'm super excited. It's a 3-part series that I'll release, and it's Joshua, and he talks about his experience going into rehab, and he talks about the fact that he could not get sober until he was able to talk about his childhood trauma. And then I was able to interview his wife, Sasha, and get her perspective on it. And then I did a third interview of her talking about her own personal experience. It was really exciting of that. But another book that I love is the book the Unexpected Joy of Being Sober, which I just think more and more people, I've read it now 4 times. And it's amazing when you read it and I think, oh, I can completely relate to that. And I can completely relate to so many of those pieces. So as part of reading that book and thinking about the impact of drugs and alcohol and just different levels of addiction, so also a book like Dopamine Nation for Anna Lemke, is that we've had now conversations in this actual room in my office with other team members. And I've learned really the number of people in my age group that I work with that seriously want to reduce their intake of alcohol and struggle with it is a lot. And so then it makes me think individuals like yourself that are so passionate about it and so happy and joyful and eager to see other people, the more that's out there and the more people are willing to talk about it, then the more those individuals can feel like it's safe to say, okay, I have a problem and I need help and I want help, versus trying to hide it in, you know, a view of society or work or what is quote unquote normal.
You know what I really enjoy it, and even today, like when I go to this fellowship, I'll just call it a fellowship type meeting where people share, and almost every share, even I mean, for years this has been happening. Everybody's telling my story. I mean, you know, so I really realize I'm in the right place because, you know, I used to take out the trash, you know, and I like slam 2 beers as fast as I could. You know, I'm like an alcoholic. You know, I sneak around and, you know, and somebody was telling their story one time, and they said I used to take out the trash and take a few swigs or whatever. I thought I totally wrote that, man. I thought that was mine, you know, and I just realized, yeah, you can't, you know, because alcoholics, you know, we're sneaky. Um, and we're also town planners. That's the other thing. It's like in early recovery, you got to watch out for this. Like you have this window of space where nobody would know if you drank, and so your town planning. It's like in advance. Like I'm gonna drink in this little spot right here because I know nobody will find out. But I mean, that's just it's you're thinking. It's like I've heard Steven Tyler, who's a good buddy of mine. Uh, he equates and he fought a lot of addictions. He had sex addiction. He went from this addiction to that. And as soon as it started getting rampant, he would go fix it. He would go to a rehab or do something. So, but he said it's like living your life, your whole life in the ocean, and then you go to dry land and you go like, "Hey, I'm okay here," you know, like everything's working out. But every second you're thinking about going back in. You know what I mean? It's like you're okay here, but I ain't gonna hang here forever, you know. And that's the way early recovery is. You're, you know, the thoughts are just overwhelming, and your
The
emotions,
obsession
and
of the mind.
yeah, your mind just plays tricks on you. You're so used to, you know, living bad, living wrong, that it's hard to live right early. So it's really tough, you know. But fellowship, I think, is a good thing. You know, if you're alone a lot in early recovery, you know, you're thinking, you're sporadic, you're crazy. But if you're hanging out with people that have your problem, like the way Bill W. or whatever figured it out years ago, it's like instead of going to talk to a psychiatrist, I need to talk to another drunk. I need to talk to somebody like me, somebody who can relate, not some, you know, book read, guy with his masters and expert on everything. I need to talk to somebody who's just a nightmare like I am. And they realized that fellowship was the answer. It's like, because you can relate, God, hey, that guy's just like me, you know, and he's pretty good to hang out with, and maybe we can keep each other sober, keep each other well. And then they start bringing it to other people. It was just a seed that just grew. That's why I love to speak at meetings. I love to hear people's stories. But like I said before we started, that I don't promote any rehab centers or any certain groups publicly. Privately, sure, I will, if I'm helping somebody or guiding someone that I think is kind of the right way. They don't have to do it like I say it. There's a lot of
Well, I
different
think
ways
it's
to
all
do it.
about saying, okay, here are some tools and resources that I've found helpful that I'm going to
Yeah.
hand out to you. And I can walk you through these. And then as you're going along your journey, if you find additional tools and items that you find helpful and assistant, share them. Because one episode we talk about, I love centers that have a diverse level of different items they make available for individuals who are there. So such as they may do EMDR, or they may do yoga, or there's just a lot of many modalities. And the reason that I love that is because I think that the tools that will work for one individual may be completely different than the tools that will work for somebody else. And as you mentioned, the goal is to heal the being of the human being. Not just, it's easy to go into rehab, quote unquote easy, to go into rehab for 30 to 40 days and take away whatever the substance is.
Yeah.
However, when you just go back out and the substance is everywhere, if you haven't done any of figured out some tools like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite tools? So some are, as I've heard you say, is helping another addict is one of your favorite tools for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other ones you use? Like, are you into meditation or mindfulness or yoga, or do you hate all of those? And are you sitting here saying, Ange, why did you say that?
No. And now that I really don't meditate as much as I pray, but I read meditation a lot. And a friend of mine, who I think he has about 11 years sober, maybe 12, we send each other literally every single day. We text each other our gratitude list.
Yes, I was hoping you would say that. Love it.
We're like, I'm grateful for another day sober. And then we say all the things, the smallest things that we're grateful for, And he's always early. I don't come until nighttime because, I don't roll out of bed and just go, okay, I'm grateful for this and that. He wakes up with the chickens and just hits me with this deal. But I send out the prayers and it's daily affirmations. It has thought for the day, meditation, prayer, messages, things to maybe help you. Just like something to read with your coffee in the morning or whatever, And there's usually a lot of wisdom in a lot of the thoughts for the day and stuff that you go, man, that came at a perfect time. God,
doesn't it always? Yes.
Yeah, it does. I mean, people will tell me or send me an email or tell me in some fashion that how this hit home so much. It's just unbelievable.
So we talk a lot about gratitude lists on this podcast. Episode 5, we talked about self-care, and Linda talked about how I kind of bullied her into doing gratitude lists. And so I want to share with the audience because I love what you said. Some individuals think, oh, I can't think of that many things that I'm grateful for, but it can be simple. My gratitude list for yesterday was 1, friends who get me, 2, electrolyte drinks I like, because I'm still struggling with drinking alcohol and I drank too much the night before. 3, upcoming time off work. 4, a vet within walking distance to work for my service dog Harley's vaccination, and 5 inside jokes and fun banter at work. So simple things to be grateful for.
Yeah.
I'm dying to know what your gratitude items were.
This is just like he numbers his, and I just said, I go, thanks, Tang. His name's Tang. You know, coolest guy. He used to, like the best. He was the best pool player. He was such a good pool player at one time. It was like amazing. But anyway, I said, grateful for my sober life today. Kale West holiday interview, my new radio show, Great White shows pouring in for next year. Finally, a local show I can drive to in February. Positive vibes from Kale this morning, who's my brother-in-law, who's in early recovery. Anyways, he was going through a tough spot where he was in F-it mode. He was real angry. And I was telling Tengen an earlier grateful thing about it. But I said, positive vibes from Kale this morning, who fought through his dark moment without drinking yesterday. I said, looking forward to holiday season with family and anticipating my granddaughter.
Woohoo! Love it!
So we just do it, you know. He came up with that. He just sent me a list, and I sent him back one. We've just started doing this like 3 weeks ago, but it's an everyday thing. So I'm sending out prayers. I'm doing this, that, and the other. I'm doing these podcasts. I'm like, you know, sending him a gratitude. I usually do it at night, you know, but it's awesome.
You're absolutely going to love it. I started doing it a couple of years ago, and at one point was sending gratitude lists to close to 30 friends. And I will admit, it became almost like a job to me. And so I've been the slacker of it. I do still send it to a couple of friends because they send me theirs. And in episode 5, Linda talks about it. She said, I actually just started doing it just so that she could keep tabs on me because she was worried about me and my mental health. And so when I started doing gratitude lists, she said, okay, I'm going to do gratitude lists just so I can kind of keep tabs on Ange. And now she's the best. And she's on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. So I get her list. And the thing I love about hearing you share the tools, so including praying and some of those, is when I read someone's gratitude list or when you were reading yours, I instantly thought there are several things you said that I need to remember to be grateful for. So it instantly brought joy to me just hearing your gratitude list, which is such a gift.
You know, you were talking about, you know, tragedy early, maybe even childhood stuff. You know, you've been through the kidnapping and everything. You know, I think a lot of times people have buried things so deep that they don't even know they're there, but it affects them in some way, their life. They, you know, so when you get together with somebody and you're trying to work on yourself, a lot of times it might come up if you're going through your life and talking about it and remember, and all of a sudden that bad memory pops into your head and you can maybe work through it. But a lot of people bury things and they've just escaped it, but it's still there. And it's that cleansing is like really killer. If you can get that handled, you feel like you've been reborn, you know. And working through my character defects wasn't easy, and it's still ongoing now in some degree. I have to exercise this stuff. I have to practice it, and it does become more natural after a while. But you know, you want to be a better person. You go, God, I'm removing this alcohol from my life. I want to become you know, I want to become a worthy person, not just dig me on bitching. I want to be the guy that, you know, caring and loving person, you know. I don't just want to be the dig me on bitching person. I want to see people get well. I want to maybe contribute, because I think life itself, if you don't have any contribution, it's almost like you just exist. You might as well just lay there like a slug and just wave to people going by or something. I just think that we can all do good things. I mean, but I never am a fan of getting attention for anything. I'm really not doing it. It'd be like, oh yeah, I just donated to a charity, and you post the amount of money you sent.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, no one cares about that. But I mean, yeah, exactly. I get 100% what you're saying. Have you ever read the poem "The Dash"?
I haven't.
Oh my gosh,
I'll have to trip on it though. I read a
yes,
lot of
yes.
poems. A lot of poems.
It is amazing. But it is basically, I'll give you the summary of it, and listeners, I'll include it in the show notes. But the premise of it is someone is talking at a funeral and said, when you look at the tombstone, you see two dates. One is a date of celebration, it's the date of birth, and the other is a date of mourning, it's the date of passing. But what often most people miss is that dash in the middle. And that dash represents all of the time that you have on earth and all of the opportunities you have to live your best life. And the reality is, I believe so many people give up the opportunity to fully live that dash.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that my perspective is I only have today. And in fact, the quote that I have on my back wall is my own personal quote. And it's like, you only have one opportunity to live, to make a difference, and to build a legacy. Make it count. So live the dash. I think you will love that poem.
I'm going to read it. But this isn't the way I've lived my whole life. Like I was saying, when I was in, my disease, let's just call it my disease. When I was in my disease, I wasn't the greatest person. You know what I mean? And to understand that I can actually change that and remove the alcohol and treat myself better, it's really quite the miracle. It really is. And then wanting other people to feel that miracle too. When I started to see the miracle work for others, it's the most amazing. I mean, nothing could happen for me monetarily or you couldn't give me anything that would make me feel like I do when someone very sick gets very well. You can't believe it. Now, I'm just saying, I'm being truthful here. I'm being an honest person. I am an honest person today. The feeling I get, it's hard to explain. It's like it's spiritual. It's like I get I can't even explain the feeling I get. But to see America, it's like witnessing a miracle, like something that's not even like doable. Aliens from outer space came down and I saw the guy. It's almost like that. But this is like somebody got well that was probably going to die. This is pretty freaking awesome. I mean, and the people that surround this guy, they're all happy. So it's not just this one person all isolated in a little cubicle. This circle of friends, people he grew up with, his family, his mom, dad, sister, brother, kids, whatever. They're all happy, So it's pretty neat that to be involved with this is almost like an addiction just to, be involved with it.
I think I'm going to say it totally is, because I feel like it's an addiction for me. And, when I first went into treatment, especially after the kidnapping, because when my kidnapper was preparing to send me into the sex trade, so I had instances in the kidnapping where when I came out, I didn't want to talk about how I experienced anything in my body. And so it took me a while when my therapist would say, well, where do you feel X, Y, and Z in your body? And I'm like, I don't even want to talk about that. Like, let's move on. Actually, that therapist listens to this podcast, so she's going to laugh when she hears this. But when you were just describing that feeling, I can
Yeah.
relate. So me and when I hear stories of healing and recovery and that
Yeah.
it is, I feel in my, like my chest, my heart just wants to explode. I feel like my skin just has tingles all over it. I just
Yeah.
feel in my gut where I just have this burst of energy around me that's just like ready to, it is the greatest dopamine high ever.
Yeah.
And in fact, speaking of the dopamine high, I was talking with my therapist once because this was when the podcast really started doing really well, which was unexpected. It wasn't intentional. The podcast was solely just to reduce the stigma and educate. That was the point of the podcast. I'm grateful that it's doing well. It was not intentional, but when it first did, and I started getting listeners saying, wow, I listened to the boundaries episode. I didn't know I could say no like that. When I started getting those
The
things,
boundaries. Yeah.
the dopamine high in that period for me was so high that I suddenly went through a week where I was very depressed and I couldn't figure out why. And it was when I was talking with my therapist and knowledge and learning things that I suddenly realized, oh, it's because I had this huge high of all of these people who were sharing how much this meant to them that suddenly my body was just like, okay, I'm now going to crash. And realizing that, it allowed me to kind of like process it and deal with it and move on. It was in a very healthy way and not
Mm-hmm.
decide, okay, I'm going to pick up an addiction or something like that. But yeah, that's how so back to how it feels in my body, like to see someone that goes from living just like a life of misery and the
Yeah.
other part that you mentioned, like the people around them. It's why
Yeah.
Rand is so passionate about these bridge grants, because when individuals are in treatment and they suddenly get cut off by insurance, they
Yeah.
literally get shipped home the next day. They don't have like
Yeah.
plans on, and so then they're going back into their community and they're not going back as fully
Yeah.
functioning individuals who can thrive and be great parts of the community they're going to. And that's just
Yeah.
a disservice to everyone.
It was very difficult. The very first time I went into rehab for 30 days, it was weird going out into the street, and even like going to 7-Eleven was like a nightmare. I was just like scared to death of everything. And and I had to go straight to the Capitol Records parking lot and celebrate the release of an album and play on stage for like a
Wow.
thousand people straight out of this rehab. It was like thrown to the wolves immediately. It was like I couldn't ease into anything. You know what I mean? That was like it's when you're confined. I mean, confined. I mean, I'm around people, but you know, you're isolated from the world. Even for 30 days, when you first go back into the world, it's a trip, man. I mean, you know, the other thing is going back to your same life, like your same circle of friends, you know, usually, I don't know, it doesn't get the best result unless you're really working this thing a day at a time and you know, really stay focused on treating yourself well and listen to these guys. The way I changed things when I decided in 2008, November 2nd, to do this for real and not have one foot in the door. This is the way they say it: one foot in the door and one out. Because I
Yep.
would look at the clock when I'd go to meetings, just you know, I can't wait till this damn thing's over with.
Yes.
Let's get this horrible thing over with. You know what I mean? And that's the attitude I have. But I showed up, you know, but I didn't love being there. And and so after failing, because like I said earlier about being jealous of people that drink normal, I would go 2 years without drinking. Okay, and I'm going to try it again. This time, I am going to be Joe and the normal drinking Joe, having a
Right.
few beers and watch the game with the boys, and I'm not going to drink the next day, and all this. And I try it and be okay for a few days, and then pretty soon the cycle started all over again. Pain, So it's a joke, but I kept going on with that, and it's just vicious. I forgot where I was going. I got sidetracked there, but
What advice would you give? Well, we're talking about going out into the community
yeah,
and people, places, and things,
yeah.
and
Well, I just think
that can be
listening. I
challenging.
know where I was. It's like I want the guy that has 30 years recovery time to kind of tell me how he did it, and I kind in the beginning I just want to follow direction. I want to because I want to be successful at this thing, and and it's more than just removing alcohol. It's or whatever your drug of choice is. Just removing that is not going to get it done. You really got to do that self work. You you have to change something, and your thinking pattern, and your habits, and you know it's so that's the way I've had success so far. But I still, with time, like I said, it takes care of itself. So I have nothing to do with the 15 years that rolled by. I just stayed sober today. That's all I do. Every day, all I do is put that one day in front of me. I can. There's not much you can't do in one day. I mean, as far as like uh, today, I'm not going to drink Dr. Pepper. You wake up the next day. Today, I am not going to drink Dr. Pepper. It's my doctor said it's bad. You know what I mean? And so you're only doing this stuff, one day at like a 24-hour period. So it makes it's not impossible. I mean, you can do it. Um, so it's work, but it's well worth it. My life is so good today. It completely freaks me out how good it is, and it's been going on like this for a while. So that's why I hang on to this one day for dear life, because I know how easy it is to go back into that dark world like that.
Right.
I've seen it happen to guys with 20 plus years sobriety. They go out, they drink once, they end up dead or something bad happens. I'm telling you, when they say, they told me this is one thing I did not believe, and this is my first rehab. I didn't believe everything they told me, but I listened. I was attentive. But when they said this disease is progressive, like if you go back and drink, it's going to be worse than when you quit, I didn't believe it until I tried it. And it took me no time to get back and worse than I was. More pain, more everything. So it's a learning process, man. I've learned so much about myself. It's not a person I really knew that well. you know,
I've
Talking
heard
about
that so much from
moi.
individuals too. Yeah. Individuals who
Yeah,
say, I didn't actually know myself when I was an addict.
yeah.
It wasn't until, which I will repeat this 10 bazillion times. I do not want the world to be full of addicts. However, I think it would be phenomenal if in middle school everyone did the 12 steps for whatever program and learned those things, because myself in another program that I'm in, and I have a phenomenal sponsor, and I agree with finding someone with solid. So when I was looking at that program for a sponsor, I found someone who had very solid recovery and just did what he said to do. But he's all into, tell me how you're feeling. He's all into feelings. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do we really have to talk about feelings today? I don't want to talk about feelings, but I'll talk about feelings because that's what he said to do. And it keeps me sober. But so I think that, and now I lost my train of thought. See, this is what thinking about feelings does to me.
Yeah.
It's all his folly throws me off.
My favorite step is step 4 because it's the one I worked on the most. Is like,
There we go.
and
The
here
steps.
I go to my sponsor and I'd show him my step 4. It's like 11 pages long,
Right.
and I'm all happy, like I'm badass. I finished number 4, right? And and he
And he
goes,
hands it back to you.
You ain't done yet, boy.
Yeah, so
And
that's what I
so
meant. Like
I,
walking through that, you learn about yourself, right?
oh man, that's how I learned the most about myself, doing moral inventory. And I'm telling you, man, did I learn a lot about me. Because how often are you going to sit down and just roll out of bed and just go, you know what, I'm just going to sit here today and do some moral inventory on myself.
All my character defects. You know, the thing that I love about it when you start working with sponsees and other individuals, okay?
Yeah.
Every newcomer is like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to say all the awful things I've done because my sponsor and everyone's going to think I'm the world's worst person. And then they share their 4th step and their sponsor's like, yep, sounds about right, And the thing I like about it is I think that individuals, I myself realized we are all human. It just humanizes all of us. We all have our mistakes. They're different. We all screwed up on things. And yet by sharing them vulnerably, it allows us to see each other as amazing human beings.
Absolutely. Some of these, like I was telling you about, these thoughts for the day, they're kind of, they go on and they talk about that in one, about if you go through your life, worried you're going to make a mistake. I mean, it's like that fear of making a mistake. It's just like you can't live like that. I can't remember exactly the language, in the thought, but it's just pretty like wise stuff. Um, it's
Growth
amazing. I
happens when you
love
make
reading. I
mistakes.
love reading this stuff, and I'll get your email later, and if
Yes.
you're interested in getting it dailies, I'll
I
add you.
am.
Okay, you'll dig it.
Absolutely.
I
I'm
mean, this
in.
is really cool stuff, man.
Dude,
It's
I'm
neat.
in. So, 2 things, or 3 things rather. One, and I'm going to go ahead and give you all 3 of them so I don't forget. One, what thoughts, motivation, encouragement would you give to the loved ones of the addicts who are sitting here watching them go in and out? So that's 1. 2, is there anything you were really hoping we would cover that we haven't? And 3, I hope you brought your favorite motivational quote because that is a requirement of this podcast.
Okay. I always suggest to go in an Al-Anon meeting just so you understand what an addict is, because I never take someone's addiction personally. I don't care how many times they go out and they blow it. I'm just hoping that they'll come back, because a lot of times it's part of the recovery process are relapses and stuff like that. But are you going to pick yourself back up and try again? That's where, and I understand that families go through a horrid time watching a loved one, you know, uh, in their disease, and a lot of times the families are funding their drug of choice, and I don't think that's the answer. Instead of putting yourself through that torture, I think tough love, even though it doesn't always work out, is the best thing for you and them. If you're funding their death, um, that doesn't work, right? Um, so the best thing for you is to do the tough love and say, I'm not going to finance your drugs anymore or your alcohol. Um, if you want to seek treatment, get well, we'll even help with that. You got to be willing, because the way you're living your life right now is not working, and you need to change something or you're going to die, and we don't want to watch you die. We shouldn't have to put ourselves through this, and I'm certainly not into financing your death. you know that would be my thinking, and what I've seen work, and it actually does work a lot of times. The tough love, have a little intervention. A lot of times they'll break down, and they'll go, okay, get me help, So I think tough love
I'm
is
going to remember
the
that
best.
financing your death. I was talking with my therapist earlier this morning, and we were talking about my nonprofit and the podcast and different ways to raise funds. And he was talking about trying to set up in Monterey a program to help homeless individuals get into treatment. And he said, the number of times I'd be so frustrated, I would finally get a bed for someone, and someone would, and the individual would be panhandling, and someone would give him $100 bill. And so then that individual wouldn't show up for the bed in the treatment center because they got a $100 bill. And he's just saying to people, okay, don't give them $100 bill. You're basically just, financing their death in that instance. Allow them to get into the bed. So he was talking very much about this very scenario that you're talking about, but I've never heard it said like that. And I absolutely am going to steal that. I'm going to say a good friend of mine said this.
Yeah. It's the thing about us selfish alcoholics is our mindset is we're just doing this to ourselves. We completely exclude the people who love us when we're in our addiction. This is my body. This is I treat. So you're just completely discarding the people who love, and they are going through a lot of pain watching you hurt yourself. So, but our thinking is, well, can you give me more money? It's pretty bad. And so on the end of the family with the addict, I just think it's best do the tough love thing, do all you can to help them, but not financially. I just don't think that's right, especially if they're not making any effort. Addiction, I respect it. I totally respect someone. I don't take it personal. Never have taken anybody's addiction personally. But man, you got to get help. I really hope for everyone that's suffering to get help because it's available. There's this other life that's available. It's right there in an arm's length reach. You can do it. I mean, you don't have to be in pain all the time and have this dark world. There's this other place that's badass. I've seen it firsthand. That available to every single person suffering out there. Every single one of you can have this life. I mean, you got to be a little patient. It ain't going to come and just bite you right out of the gate, but it will get better. Everybody that told me my life is going to get better were absolutely spot on. Man, it's quite the miracle. I don't remember your second question.
Well, the second question was, was there something you wanted to cover that we haven't already covered today?
Well, I think what I just now spoke about is something I like to cover because, we've overly talked about it, but a lot of times I think people want to be sober. I think they're kind of tired of creating injury toward their spouses or their kids, because your kids, a lot of people think kids don't know what the hell's going on. What does he know? He's 7 years old. I knew every single thing about every quirk of my father when I was 8 years old. I knew where his pot was. I knew where his joints were. I knew where his cross-top speed was. Used to fall out of his pocket. I knew where all his empty bottles were. They were in his coat pockets in the closet. I'm 8. They think I'm just a stupid little kid that plays baseball every once in a while, likes riding mini bikes. No, man, I know exactly what you're doing, dude. I mean, you're not fooling no one. So, but it hurts too. I used to see my dad get drunk, not a violent alcoholic, happy Joe, but he would like drive, or he'd do things that scare me, and I used to get scared if I thought my parents were going to break up, if they got in like this kind of verbal argument. So, you know, kids cannot stand to watch their parents injure themselves, you know, and so I just think it's a more positive life. And we aren't talking about people that go out and have a social drink with their friends and have enjoyment. We're talking about problem cases. I mean, like literally, where their life's consumed with their drug or alcohol, and it's affecting everyone around them, the responsibilities, creating a lot of pain. So those are the people I'm speaking to. You know, the ones normal I've heard, I mean, just occasionally, it's probably like under 1% that will say, why can't you guys just quit, man? Shit. Why do you got to go through
When
all this
I
stuff?
when I hear that, especially when I was in eating disorder camp,
Yeah.
because I'll share this. When I was really young, my mom was very abusive and she would feed my brothers and not feed me. And so I learned that if I wasn't hungry, she couldn't hurt me. So then I used that skill later in life. Okay. And so then I would have people say to me, why don't you just eat? So the same thing, like, why don't you just not drink? What? And I finally got to the point and just said, that's a great idea. I never thought about it. Thank you so much for sharing that to me.
Yeah. And there
It's
was
not
one
that
more
easy.
thing. There was one more thing
So
towards
one
the
more
end.
thing is, what is your favorite motivational quote, Mark?
Um, I kind of like this one, and I do remember it. It's by Bob Marley.
Yes.
He says, "Open your eyes, look within. Are you satisfied with the life you're living?"
I love that.
Strong.
That is
And
strong.
happiness
Mark,
is not a destination or an experience. It's a decision.
a decision. I love that.
But there's even
Mark, this
better
has been
ones. When you
amazing.
start getting my dailies, you're gonna
I
trip.
can't wait.
There's some killer thoughts for the days. Really cool stuff, man.
I will share one of my favorite ones in my office that I have
Yeah,
right now. I'm going to grab it really quick. So I painted this sign. I think it's not turned around yet. I think you can see it. I painted this sign years ago, but it's every great story on the planet happened when someone decided not to give up.
great, love it,
Well, Mark,
inspiring.
this has been amazing. I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful.
Thanks for having me on your show, and hopefully, if there's anybody out there, kind of in trouble or whatever, maybe they can take a couple things out of here, and hopefully they're inspired enough to try to get well, get on the road to recovery, and
If
that's
they were not inspired by what you shared, I don't know what, because I was so inspired by what you shared. It was amazing.
thank you. Okay, well that's good. And my compulsive thing, I'm so damn compulsive. I just
I was thinking, and I had cut out the recording, but then I turned it back on. Yeah, I love what the analogy you just said, because yes, other people haven't been kidnapped, but 100%, you're right. We're all in some ways trying to escape something
yeah.
and using something. And then the compulsive part, I was just in Vegas with my coworker. We did not stay on the strip. We did old lady Vegas. We stayed at a resort. We saw Michael Jackson, Cirque du Soleil. We spent a day at the spa. We slept in late. And but she had said, okay, I'm going to go and gamble, but I'm only going to, like, $200 was her limit. Perfect. And so I went and sat and watched her, and people were like, are you not going to gamble? And I was like, no, I've never gambled. And I will tell you this, I know Ange's personality. If I were to gamble, I would get addicted to gambling and I would ruin my life. I have a compulsive personality. I know exactly what would happen. I've never done, thank goodness, I've never done drugs. I've had alcohol, but I've never done drugs, because when I was 15 and I saw the girl shooting up in the bathroom, I said,
Wow.
if I do drugs, I will probably be on the street as a prostitute or dead. I just knew that in my personality. And I'm so grateful. And because I know these things, I do not judge anyone who's living
No.
any of those lives, because it
Right.
could very well have been me if I had just made
Sure.
one different decision.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, we didn't really touch on this, but like when you're working on your addiction, you kind of got to watch yourself because of that compulsive thing that you don't get addicted to something else that's not so good for you. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Is
Yep.
that can happen too. Some people might, you know, be an alcoholic and they get well and done all this inventory and become sex addicts, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Or become some other kind of addict and start, wailing away at that. So we got to police ourselves, try, trying to live right.
One day at a time, right?
That's it. It's just one day, man. You can do it. You can do anything
Just
for
one
one
day.
day. Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thanks for having